Test, test. All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the monthly meeting of the City of Des Moines Zoning Board of Adjustment and an introduction to winter. This board has the power under Iowa law and the zoning ordinance of the City of Des Moines to hear and make decisions on requests for variances and exceptions from the regulations in the zoning ordinance, to review conditional use requests, and to consider appeals from any decision of city staff in the administration of the zoning ordinance. The members of this board are citizens of the City of Des Moines. They have been appointed to this board by the City Council. The board members are volunteers and they receive no compensation for their public service. I'll take a moment and introduce our board members. On the audience's left is Heather Ann Rowe. Next to him is Kuku Sa. Next to him is Marlis Jones. On the audience's right, Tom DeCio. Next to him is Dave Gare. And then Rhonda Cedillo. My name is Mel Pins, the board chair. I'll introduce city staff who will be assisting us today with the hearing and its process. On my left is the board's legal counsel, Gary Guidelock. I'll introduce staff here down to the audience's left at the table. Frank Dunn-Young, senior city planner. Bert Dross, the deputy planning administrator. And Chris Heilskove, zoning enforcement officer. Assisting us with some of our behind-the-scenes things, meeting moderator is Monica Vasquez, sitting here down front. I'll now cover the meeting's procedure briefly. For some of you, this may be your first time in front of the board. You may hope it's your only time, but we will take you through this. So don't worry about the procedure itself. Just focus on what you care about, and we'll make sure that everyone is heard. But to give you the background, first of all, the Zoning Board of Adjustment is a quasi-legal board. This hearing will be conducted within the procedures and format as authorized by Iowa law and this city's ordinances. This meeting is open to the public. The meeting is being recorded by both audio and video for a legal record of these proceedings. The board members have each received a copy of the agenda and the staff recommendation. So you as audience members, if you didn't pick up a copy of the agenda and the staff recommendations, we've got them in the little black trays between the doors here. So if you want to pick up a copy of the agenda when I'm through with my remarks, feel free to do so. This board is required to base its decision on each item upon the criteria that's been established by law for the type of relief sought by the applicant. The law applicable to each case has been identified in the written staff report. If the facts, as determined by this board, demonstrates that the criteria established by law for granting the relief has been satisfied, then the board must grant the relief. Otherwise, the board must deny the requested relief. Each item will be announced in the order that it appears on the agenda. Items that are listed on the consent portion of the agenda, which is our first section of the agenda, are not planned to be individually discussed. Rather, they will be considered for approval in accordance with the recommendation in the staff report. Unless the appellant does not agree to the conditions that have been recommended by staff, or if there's an individual in the audience here or a board member that requests that the item be removed from the consent agenda so that a full discussion on the matter can occur here during the regular portion of the agenda today. So I'll come back to that consent agenda in just a minute. For the regular portion of the agenda, after an item is announced, city staff will first give a brief overview of the appeal. They will present any written comments that have been received prior to the hearing. Then the applicant or their representative will be allowed up to 10 minutes to present their appeal. We'll then move to the public comment portion of the hearing for that specific agenda item, and anyone that wishes to speak in support of the item, in opposition to it, or maybe even in neutrality with related terms, will be allowed up to 5 minutes each to provide their comments. This will be their one and only opportunity to address the board for that agenda item. Once all concerned citizens have spoken on the item, the board will then ask any additional questions of city staff. Lastly, the applicant will be given 3 more minutes for a rebuttal or other closing comments. All speakers must speak only from the podium here at the center of the room by the screen there. Begin their presentation by first giving both their name and address of business or residence in the event that you may need to be contacted for legal notices that are related to the outcome of the appeal. All speakers are requested to remain courteous and to focus their comments only upon those facts that demonstrate whether or not the criteria established by law has been satisfied. Speakers are asked to ensure that they are respectful of time considerations, and if necessary, the board chair will limit further comments by a speaker if they exceed their time limitation. After all have spoken, the board chair will close any further public comments on the agenda item, and the board will immediately deliberate the request here. You'll hear our comments, but you can't add any more, and we'll make a decision on the appeal here today. Please note that it takes at least 4 affirmative votes for any zoning appeal to gain approval. We're a 7-member board, always takes 4 for approval. If your appeal is approved today, we'd ask that you wait until at least about 1 week from today's hearing if you'd need to contact the city's Permit and Development Center to obtain any necessary building or sign permits that are related to your appeal. This will allow the decision of the board to be documented in the form of a decision and order, which will be provided to you and to city staff for the record. Any appeal that is approved by this board must be implemented, constructed, or otherwise utilized within 2 years of the date of the decision by this board, or such approval shall expire. Finally, the decisions of this board can only be appealed in the Iowa District Court. So if you believe you've been harmed by an error made by this board, your only remedy is to seek relief through the court within 30 days of the filing of the board's decision and order. If you believe the zoning regulations applied by this board are wrong, you may petition the City Council to change those regulations, but only for future considerations. All material written or otherwise used today as part of any presentation is part of the permanent record. Pardon me. And if you would plan to show any photos, drawings, diagrams, or documents that you've not already given copies of to city staff, you'll need to give city staff an appropriate copy of those items. Also, you may contact city staff after the hearing if you'd like a copy of anything presented today. Just some quick housekeeping items. We'd ask that you avoid any undue conversation in the audience so as to limit distractions during the hearing. You're doing a great job so far. Please also ensure your cell phone has been silenced. Good job as well. And if you need to use a restroom, just leave through the doors. You don't have to go back downstairs. There are restrooms just past the staircase on the left, as well as an elevator to go back down to first floor. Once the agenda item you're interested in has been completed, you are welcome to leave the meeting, or you can stick around with the rest of us. So that's the background. So what I'm going to do now is ask staff if we do have any changes to the agenda as it has been presented. So Frank's going to come up and just see if we do have some changes there. I think he'll have to find that microphone. Yeah. They hit it on you. We need to have the roadies do a sound check before we get started.
Check 1, check 2.
Good.
Sounds good. Frank Dunyoung, planning staff. Good afternoon, Chair, members of the board. We are looking at two changes in the agenda. The first change that we're looking to make has to do with item 4, which is an appeal for a conditional use at 515 Euclid Avenue. It's use of the existing 650 square foot building for bar use with sales of alcoholic liquor, wine, and or beer for on-premises consumption. And so we've received positive feedback from neighbors, from the neighborhood association, and the applicant has agreed to all of the conditions of approval, and they meet separation distances. So we're looking to have that item moved to the consent agenda.
Okay. Would there be anybody here in the audience that would be opposed to the requested variance and conditional use in item 5 for use of, or I'm sorry, which item was that again?
Item 4.
4. Item 4, which was for conditional use for, in essence, a bar use at 515 Euclid Avenue. Is there anybody in the audience that would be opposed to us granting that approval? You don't have to say anything, just raise your hand for the moment. All right, seeing none, board members, if anybody would like to have this heard as a full agenda item, we can. If there wouldn't be any opposition to moving that to consent otherwise, would there be a motion to do so? All right, motion by Marlis, second by Rhonda. All those in favor to move item 4 to consent, raise your right hand, say aye. All right, carries 7-0. Any other changes, Frank?
Yeah, the next change pertains to item 5, 39. It's located at 3921 East 14th Street. It is an appeal for a variance of the separation distances for a liquor store. Staff is, there was an error with the notification, so appropriate, not all of the folks within 250 feet received notice. So we are looking at cleaning that up, sending notices out. So we request a continuance to the December 18th Board of Adjustment meeting.
So you're saying that you did issue a notice for the correct distance, 250 feet, but what, you missed some somehow, or?
Right, there was an error in some of the mailings, so some of the folks didn't receive that. And so this would give an opportunity for...
And did you consider that substantial enough?
We do.
Okay, all right. I won't ask anything further. I'm assuming, is the applicant okay with that? Relatively, did you tell them that you might?
We did, and they understood.
Okay.
They didn't agree nor disagree, but...
Okay, all right. So the city is requesting continuance on item 5 to next month to do some notifications.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Okay, board members, anybody, or is everybody okay with a continuance? Any other questions? If not, would there be a motion to continue this to next month? Motion by Tom, second by Rhonda. All those in favor, raise your right hand, say aye. Any opposed? Seeing none. Okay, so we'll hear item 5 next month instead. Well, I'm not sure who this person is, but we're not taking testimony. The city asked for continuance. I asked if the applicant had understood that. Is this the applicant?
He's one of the applicants. There's multiple folks as the applicant on there.
Do you have a question or do you have a statement? If you have a question, you'll need to come up to the board. I'm going to grant you 3 minutes. Come on up. I need your name and your full address, and you've got 3 minutes to address the board. But I'm not opening up the hearing at this time.
Sounds good. Thanks for the opportunity. I appreciate the work the staff has done on this. We learned about a potential mistake on the mailings. We did do the diligence. I'm sorry, my name is Fernando Vega, eXp Realty. I'm a commercial agent, live in the neighborhood, 1509 East 13th Street, 50316. We did sent out invitations to the list provided by the staff, and we got 3 people to attend our meeting last Thursday, and we did receive support from the people that attended. Yesterday, as we were learning the mistake from the staff, we were disappointed. The landlord was, the tenant is disappointed that this is being potentially pushed to December, especially when it's not in the plans to. It will be easier for us for everybody to know a decision today versus in a month from now. So many moving parts go on when you're starting a small business and when life savings are put into a small business like this. So I know that you already have passed it for next month, but if there's a possibility to have a discussion or make a decision for today, that would be very helpful for everybody involved.
All right, Fernando, I appreciate your advocacy, and I'm a little disappointed with the city that this is what I don't like us to be getting into. This should be pretty common procedure for you guys to be able to notify folks. So now we put this guy in this position, he's got to wait. So I guess unless I want to do an interrogative and ask, well, how many addresses did you miss? Why is this that significant that you feel you need to defer it? Maybe you could have reached out to those people you missed and informed them. But I don't want to get into that. So I think for this time, I'm going to say we'll probably move along. But again, we have to vote on it yet, right? Yeah. So I appreciate your input. So, all right. So staff has made a request that we continue this to next month. Did we have a motion for continuance? Was that Tom? Second by Rhonda. All those in favor? Raise your right hand. All right. No opposition to that. Okay. So lesson to be learned for staff. It's kind of embarrassing. All right. So we'll move on. So that'll bring us back to the consent items on our agenda today. I'm going to read through these, and again, city staff is recommending approval for these items subject to some conditions that staff would like to see for the operations. So I'm just going to briefly read each item where it's located. If somebody would be opposed to the city granting approval, just raise your hand, and then we will put that item on our regular hearing today, and we will have testimony on both sides then. So item 1 is a conditional use request, City of Des Moines Parks and Rec, vicinity of 2100 Sailor Road, for construction of some public recreational areas related to Birdland Marina. So that's item 1. Is there anybody in the audience who would be opposed to this board granting the conditional use request here? If there is, just raise your hand. Seeing none. Item 2, also on the consent agenda, is to amend an existing conditional use, 2142 East Market, related to a junk and salvage yard use, and that will relate to some more intensive uses there. Staff is recommending approval of that, subject to a few conditions. Is there anybody opposed to the board granting this requested amendment to their existing conditional use permit? Seeing none. Then we also put item 4, that's on consent. And again, if anybody last minute has changed their mind, anybody be opposed to this board granting use for a bar at 515 Euclid? All right, seeing no hands, so we have items 1, 2, and 4 on consent. Board members, unless there's other discussion you'd like to have, or would want to move one of these to regular, would there be a motion to approve consent? Motion by Marlis, second by Rhonda. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All right, motion carries 7-0. So if you were here for items 1, 2, or 4, those have been approved. You'll get a copy of that decision in order in about a week. So if you would need to come to City Hall for any building permits or sign permits, wait until you get a copy of that so that we kind of keep the horse in front of the cart. So again, if you were here for items 1, 2, or 4, congrats. You're welcome to leave the hearing, or you can stick around as we move into our regular agenda. We'll just take a moment here and let some of the folks depart. Okay. Item 3 is a zoning exception request related to signage at 700 Walnut Street, and we're going to have Bert present on this item.
All right, members or chair, members of the board, Bert Dross, planning staff for the city. Item number 3 is a series of 3 type 2 zoning exceptions that are needed in order to allow a 511 square foot sign near the top of the EMC building at 700 Walnut Street. The subject property, like I said, is at 700 Walnut Street in the downtown core. It's a high-rise structure. I'm sure you're all familiar with the building. I'll have some photos of it here shortly. But they're wanting to put a sign, a 500 square foot sign on the upper portion of the building. In the downtown district, buildings are only allowed to put signage on the bottom 3 floors. So they're needing the first design alternative, or the first zoning exception is just to allow a sign above the 3rd floor, and then the others have to do with the sign being over the maximum 200 square feet otherwise earned. So here's the elevation that the applicant provided. I'm sure you're familiar with this building. Again, the sign at the top would be about 511 square feet in area. That's a rectangle drawn around all of the signage components. Here are some photos of the building taken from various perspectives. And again, I'm showing this to kind of give you an idea of what the character of the downtown skyline is. You'll see there are very few buildings in the downtown with signage above the third floor. Again, this is taken from the EMC overlook. And I think there's some signage maybe on the top of one of the nationwide parking garages. Otherwise, there really isn't any visible signage above third floors of the building. If we're looking at signage from other angles of downtown, maybe there's the Marriott Hotel, there's the Lumen building, and on Capitol Square, the Des Moines Register has a sign above the third floor. But otherwise, you can see from these photos, there's very few visible signage when looking at the skyline. And then this was taken from the EMC overlook at night. And again, that proposed sign would be in this general location. So staff had to look at the criteria that the board must apply when considering type 2 zoning exceptions. It's not easy to be up here recommending denial of a sign for EMC because EMC really is a good corporate citizen. They've done a lot for our city. Again, with that EMC overlook, they've donated money for a downtown park. They're obviously giving money for the renaming of Hy-Vee Hall. So they are a good corporate citizen, so it's not, our staff recommendation isn't taken lightly for recommending denial, but we do believe that the proposed sign is out of character with the existing skyline. As I mentioned, there really aren't that many examples of visible signage above third floors of buildings. Our zoning code was written really to protect the skyline from being cluttered with additional signage. So we have recommended the denial of the proposed type 2 zoning exceptions. We didn't get any comment cards back in support or opposition. So.
You notified everybody?
We did notify. Yeah. Sorry. With that previous item, we didn't, we had mailed them out and they were missing some address information. They came back from the post office just yesterday. If we would have got it a week ago, we would have been able to correct it. But since we got it late in the day yesterday, there wasn't any.
So with some kind of an autofill on the macro, it didn't have a zip code or something?
Right. I don't think anybody was more frustrated than us.
Okay.
But anyway, back to this item.
Thank you, though. Appreciate that. But yeah, so no comments received from anybody with notification on that. And I am just briefly curious with that radius map. I know we have a lot of downtown living. Are there any residential uses within that area? And if so, if they were owner occupied, they would have been?
They would have been notified,
Okay.
right? Yeah. EMC owns most of it around it, to be
Okay.
honest. And Longmark.
Yeah, but it's about
Yeah.
ownership within the radius and whether they own all or part of it, that doesn't matter.
Right. And
Okay.
even if there was residences within that 250 feet, I don't think it's the people within the notice area that are even going to be able to see it way at the top of the building.
Right. But if it was like a condo that they all own their unit, like at the plaza or something, they'd all get a notice, right?
Right.
So we
Okay.
probably don't have that down
No,
here.
we didn't.
Okay. All right, you up for some questions?
Sure.
Okay, unless you had anything else you wanted to add?
No.
Okay. All right, board members, questions for Bert?
Yeah, question. So with the other exceptions, why were variances provided or were they grandfathered in?
I know with the register media sign that's on Capitol Square, that one did need to get a design alternative. And I remember the board really reduced the sign, the size of that. And when they applied it, Mel might be the only one on this board that would remember that one, but they originally wanted it facing the Civic Center. And the board said, we're not going to allow that, but we will let you put it on the north side of the building. And then like the Marriott and the Lumen signs, I think those have been grandfathered in. Like they've been there. Like the Lumen sign used to be the CenturyLink, and before that Quest, and before that Bell. Yeah, so those just have always been there. They've been allowed to be replaced. But.
Yeah, good question. Other questions? Bert, this this is at exception level, right? This is not a variance request. This is considered an
The
exception
code was
level.
amended a few years ago so that these types of appeals could be considered as exceptions.
Okay.
Like I said earlier, the maximum size allowed for any sign is 200 square feet.
Okay.
And they're proposing 511. So it's more than a 50% deviation. That would be like,
And some related questions, since you got the picture here, and, the applicant, I'm sure it's up, they'll have a presentation, and they should do the majority of their own homework, but I don't see that you put a little area on the building of what the sign size or impact would look like, but it would kind of be right there.
right.
Yeah. Related to that, this is one side only, right?
It is.
Because I think the old Bankers Trust at Ruan, they had a request up to, I think, 4. They wanted one on every side, and we kind of
Right.
said it maybe be reasonable on 1 or 2 sides, but not 4. And this sign would not be above the parapet or above the roof line of the building, correct? It would just be on the
It
side.
would be on the side of the
Yeah,
building.
it's not
right.
sticking up above it or anything.
Right.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah, and that view, by the way, yes, that's the EMC overlook at McCray Park.
Exactly,
correct?
yes.
Yes. Been there many a time with that view. Great place. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thanks for the intro, Bert. So the way the hearing works, applicant or representative of the applicant, you've got up to 10 minutes to tell us why we should grant your exception request. Just need you to start with your name and address as appropriate.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. I'm Ryan Squire, representing 700 Walnut or EMC Insurance. And I'll just kind of go on to some of the questions that were asked. So EMC actually just removed a sign larger than the variance on 717. It was a double-sided sign. It equated to, considering both sides, over 600 square feet. So we've removed that sign. It's a historical building. It was equivalent depending on how you do stories. Let's say it was roughly anywhere from 10 to 12 stories tall. It could be seen over the parking garage from EMC Overlook Park. From Fluor, not captured in pictures, and I apologize, we did not capture it in pictures prior to removal, and maybe we should have. And so all we're asking is to move that current sign, or roughly the previous sign, to a building that EMC did provide to the city, to our employers, that is part of the skyline, and believe that is a very key part to what we're doing from an exception standpoint. As we all know, Casey's just spent a significant amount of money to put a brand on Wells Fargo Arena, or previous Iowa Event Center, sorry. As part of the event center, we also know there was a variance granted for community choice credit union, that is also over the allotted square footage that was allowed. And so I believe by making statements that say there's not a lot of them, but they're allowed, kind of leads to the fact of that signage is important in downtown and urban market. I do believe that it should never maybe be always allowed. Again, the rule on every side, we were very thoughtful. Our building is a 45-degree angle on the south side. Does not make sense to put a sign at that elevation, also because of the angle. So 3 sides of the building were automatically reduced. And then when you talk about signage and business and how we're trying to achieve what we're trying to achieve, I know that's beyond this, but employing 1,000 people in Des Moines, we have many missed opportunities to create an environment of NCAA tournament. EMC markets through independent agents. No one knows who EMC is. We're trying to get our brand out, our new logo, which is part of the challenge of having a sign restriction based on a square footage. Because if your logo is a certain size, now we have insurance before we never had insurance. There's a technology company called EMC, very confusing. So we had to, as we rebranded, we embedded insurance. Just because our brand or logo now exceeds these sizes, it becomes very difficult to manage that. That everyone should just have a really small brand and logo. Hence, Nationwide has multiple signs. I used to work at Nationwide as well. We did have one on the south side that was 10 stories high. We also, because Nationwide has the N and Eagle, different type of brand, they have one that faces west down Walnut Street, purposely strategically put there for the branding opportunity, but they didn't have to write out Nationwide and do all of that. They just have an N and Eagle. So some of it is the subject to our brand, unfortunate, but I would say there's enough evidence throughout the city that says it's not going to be an eyesore. We also own, yes, the majority of the south side all the way down, all the way to EMC Overlook. And so it was just a fitting thing that our CEO and our board was very excited about from our brand and the EMC Overlook Park and the park we just put downtown to kind of connect EMC and continue to drive home that Des Moines is important. We're not a dead city. Come here, it's great, love our skyline, but I travel a lot for my job, and it's very interesting. We can have a point of view that signs are bad. You can also have a point of view that as we get through variances that we do have a lively downtown. We do employ a lot of people. We do give back a lot. And I think that's what signage can kind of bring that together. Instead of saying it's an eyesore, I think it can be seen as we have businesses. We have these things. So not a lot besides main takeaway is we just removed a larger sign that was above every variance that we were requesting. Yes, our size and scale got a little bit bigger because our building's taller. So any questions? Or
Any questions for the applicant? And we may have some from others, but I just got a couple that I had here in my notes. So this building, I remember when it was built, and when it's lit at night, you guys have a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek reputation of what the building looks like, the old Absolute bottle building. That's only because there's a shadow on your smaller elevation. If you put floodlights up there, that'd go away.
correct.
But it's always just kind of been a building that has been of good character in the Des Moines skyline, blended into the Des Moines skyline. The building itself, do you as EMC, do you occupy the majority of the building with your employees and operations, every floor, partial floors? Could you describe what you do in there?
Yes, we do have one tenant, which is a significant law firm in the city of Des Moines, and they operate 3 floors in our building currently.
Okay. And I'm not counting windows here, and I know how it tapers a little, but about how many floors do you guys use then?
17.
17. So you're 80% of the building's occupancy or more?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
gotcha.
Yep. And our tenant did agree and approve, and they liked the concept, and
Gotcha.
we kept them downtown as well from moving to the suburbs.
And I apologize again, you've had a great presence here for many years and decades. Is this your headquarters, or is this just a large operations center here in Des Moines for your
This is our corporate headquarters.
This is your corporate
Yep.
headquarters?
Yep. And so when they built it, they kept their headquarters in the historical building of 717.
Ah, that's right, okay.
As we've kind of evolved and changed and being part of a skyline and that significance, and as
Okay.
leadership changed and new branding, everything comes with it, is the question kept coming up is why?
Yep.
And it's, I can't change what was done in 1996, 95, those decisions, and
Yep.
we did have internal conversations regarding, everyone does refer to the building as the vodka building.
Yeah.
We don't like to talk about it, and we...
Sorry.
No, we've played with some lighting, and it's a hard one, but it is one of those ones where it is great, and then it's also not great to be represented if you're not a liquor company, or you're an insurance company.
There's usually no bad PR if it's designed to be innocuous, so.
Yes, it's just, if you don't get credit for it, we're not getting that marketing.
Right,
that
exactly.
business
I
side.
get it.
Yep.
Other questions for the applicant? Okay, we'll check back with you in a few minutes.
Okay, thank you.
So for the next part of the hearing, is there anybody that wishes to speak in support of the applicant's request? Carol, come on down. And we do need your full name and address. You got up to 5 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Carol Maher. I live in downtown Des Moines. I'm a renter at the Equitable Building. So if I happen to be within 250 feet of any request, I hope that as a renter, not a condo owner, I do get notice. I moved here 4 years ago from Chicago, as most of you know. Chicago is sort of the city of architecture, a really great skyline, and one of the things that was apparent to me as soon as I moved here was, where are the logos on the buildings? Because Chicago, one of the great things about it, besides that Trump sign that got approved, there's really great logos on buildings that are company HQs, right? And it gives residents civic pride in the fact that you have these great world headquarters here in my then city. And it also adds vibrancy and color, especially at night, to the buildings. And one of the big signs that exists in Des Moines that we're proud about, it's on t-shirts and stickers, is the Traveler's umbrella. that says the Travelers Company or something like that on it. I used to work for City Group, which had Travelers as part of its suite of businesses, and I was like, is Travelers still in business as Travelers? I was very confused by that sign, and come to learn that, no, there's no Travelers presence in Des Moines anymore. we just like the sign, which is big, standalone, and I would think break all the rules that are on the books now. So my personal opinion as a downtown resident and someone who lived in what could arguably be the top architectural city in certainly the United States, maybe the world, that signs add to the feel and fabric of a vibrant downtown, and I think we should be in support of that 100% all the time, especially someone that's a good corporate citizen like EMC that are promoting people that live and work downtown. People come downtown for, as they've just been named title sponsor of the hall. We should be supporting that. And this is hardly obtrusive. It's only going to be visible to most people that are looking from the south. So I think that we should absolutely 100% support this signage. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Anybody else that wishes to speak in support of the applicant? Anybody that wishes to speak in opposition to the applicant's request? Or maybe even in just neutrality? Anything you want to add about signs downtown related to this? Seeing none, do we have any further questions for staff? I don't think we do.
Yes, I do.
Oh, yes, Cuckoo, go ahead.
So, as far as sizing is concerned, is there a scale? Just if it's a 20, 30 floor building versus a 10 floor building, is there a difference in sizing?
I mean, no, our zoning code gives signage based on how much lineal feet of building frontage you have. So for the first, second, and third floor of the building, they would earn like 1.75 square feet of signage area per lineal foot of frontage. But to say, do they get bonuses for going higher? We don't have any of that in our code. Like if they get X square feet more, X percent more because they're higher or anything. If that's what you're asking.
Yeah, follow-up question on that, and I don't want to put you on the spot to do the math, but if it is 1, 2, 3, if it went up to 20, 21 floors, what size would that be?
So if, like, on the appeals, so if they were going to earn, is 1.25, not 1.75, it's 1.25 square feet of signage per lineal foot of occupant frontage. So given the building size, they would earn a maximum of 276 square feet. However, the appeal right above it also states that in the DX district, no sign should be larger than 200 square feet, even if they earn more than 200 square feet. So we put both of those appeals on here. But so the 200 square feet would be the maximum they could put on the first, second, or third floor, even though they would otherwise earn 276 square feet if it was purely based on the amount of occupant frontage.
Okay.
Does that make sense, or did I confuse you more?
That makes sense for the first 3 floors.
Yeah.
So some public school math estimation, about a 12 by 16 or 12 by 15 sign is all they would be allowed as a ratio to fit the 200 square foot max. That's kind of what
Something
I'm
like that, yeah.
figuring out in my head here.
Yep.
So just to give it some proportion, because I understand what Cuckoo's getting at here for, existing size that would be allowed.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
A sheet of
Yeah.
plywood's 4 by 8, so, and I always do that in my head,
Yeah.
How many sheets of plywood on the side of the building? Okay, good questions. Any other questions for Bert? Okay. Well, since no one had any opposition, we did have one question for staff. As a courtesy, we don't have a big agenda. We'll give you 3 minutes if you'd like any other closing comments or rebuttal. If there's nothing else you want to add, you don't have to, but if you'd like to wrap this up with any final thoughts, you're welcome to do so.
I like math. I grew up on the south side of Des Moines. I'm born and bred here. My wife's an architect. She's here way more often than I am. Your 235 square feet, that's only taking into account the south-facing facade, correct? Okay, so lineage or the linear feet that I would actually have, and again, I'm going to assume all sides are the same, which they're not, I would get close to 800 square feet. And if I add my actual math that we did back in our office, I would be close to allotted. If I said I would reduce from 4 sides to 1 side of signage, I would push close to 1,000 square feet of allotted signage. Thank you.
Okay, all right. All right, we'll go ahead and close the public portion and go to board deliberation. So board members, any initial thoughts on this? Cuckoo.
Thinking through the scale, just based on the size of the building and based off the size of the sign, it makes sense for a more significant increase if it's a bigger building. And then just thinking through the comments on the calculation based off of 3/4, that feels a little restrictive.
I can understand that, yeah. Any other thoughts? Well, I kind of weigh in here. I give Carol some great credit here. I think all the notes I had is exactly what Carol said. When we look at a downtown, I don't care if it's a small town or a big city, the fabric, the vibrancy of what you see with the facade, the approach, our communities are our people and our businesses. And I don't think signs are always evil. I think sometimes they make a statement about who we are. What would Waterloo, Iowa be without seeing a John Deere logo somewhere? I travel a lot for my work, and when I'm in a major city, I try to go to a Major League Baseball game if I can sneak some time in. And so many cities have tried to build their ballparks downtown and arrange them so the outfield view shows their awesome skyline, whether it's Denver, St. Louis, Kansas City, Marietta, Georgia for Atlanta Braves. Every single one of those, when I sit there, I can see the 3, 4, 5 major corporations that make up their downtown because they have a sign on their buildings. And none of them look annoying. Most of them are on a scope and scale like this one. When we did see those views of downtown that city staff provided, I thought those were pretty cool, but they were kind of like, they just weren't very exciting. I'd like to see a little more color in our downtown with a view at night. Buildings have done that with general lighting. But this sign, staff has here that they believe it have a significant adverse impact on the surrounding area. Frankly, in scope and scale, I think it's the reverse. I think it's just a nice little accent sign on a nice building. I don't think it's out of scale. I don't think it's out of scope. I don't think it's out of a courtesy to anybody who would own a building of this size with that much employment activity in it. This is their national headquarters. They have a lot to be proud of here. And again, I do see this a lot. We always have to keep an eye on signs. I understand why we have a zoning ordinance for that. But that's why this board is here for certain exceptions, variances, considerations. That's why we're a board of adjustment. Sometimes we need to adjust the back, put things in alignment. I think in this case, it would be within the character of the surrounding area and the existing skyline. I don't think it's out of character, and I don't think it will cause an adverse impact. As such, I'm going to make a motion to approve the requested exceptions, subject to the general drawing, size, scope, area as the applicants present. Would there be a second? Second by Dave. Unless there's any other comments, feel free to weigh in before we vote. If none, all those in favor to grant the requested exception, raise your right hand, say aye. All right, motion carries 7-0. I appreciate staff, towing the line, but I appreciate what you guys do. Thank you. Yeah. So just make sure you do get a sign permit before you put that up there. And we'll have a copy of that decision in order by next week as the foundation for you to apply for your sign permit. Appreciate your patience. Thanks for coming down. I believe that concludes our regular agenda items for the day. We have minutes from last month, And if anybody was here last month, are there any changes? If not, would there be a motion to approve the minutes? Motion Rhonda, second Marlis. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Aye. Motion carries 7-0. I don't think we have any other new business. Again, for December, we'll meet a week early, the third week of the month instead of the fourth. We may have a few more agenda items. And I may also suggest just maybe a social get-together after the next hearing, so, to end the year. All right, well, that's all the business we have. Thank you for your attention and your service. This hearing is adjourned.